Greetings, philosophers. I am an idiot. So these past several chapters that I've been misreading the Roman numerals like a moron because I thought the XL was reversed when in reality you're supposed to subtract it when it's in that order. So instead of being in the 60s like I thought, we've been in the 50s. So when it's XL, L is 50, X is 10, and the X is before the L, that means it's actually 40 instead of 60. So, woo, wonderful. So today we're progressing into the 50s. This is letter LIII, which is 53. So hooray for learning. Let's get started. I think that's the first time I've used that knowledge about Roman numerals, maybe since grade school, because I don't know, you just never see them. I wonder where there's anything I couldn't be persuaded into now, after letting myself be persuaded recently into taking a trip by sea. The sea was quite calm when we cast off. The sky was certainly heavily overcast, with the kind of dark clouds that generally break in a squall or downpour. But in spite of the uncertain, threatening skies, I thought it would be perfectly feasible to make it across the few miles from your Parthenope over to Puteoli. And so, with the object of getting the crossing over quicker, I headed straight for Nisus, over the open water, to cut out all the intervening curves of the coastline. Now, when I had got so far across that it made no odds whether I went on or turned back, first of all, the smoothness which had tempted me to my undoing disappeared. There was no storm as yet, but a heavy swell was running by then, and the waves were steadily getting rougher. I began asking the helmsman to put me ashore somewhere. He kept saying that the coast was a rugged one without a haven anywhere, and that there was nothing he feared quite so much in a storm as a lee shore. I believe a lee shore means a shore downwind. So, like, if something happens with the boat, the wind will naturally push you towards the shore. Yes, that's what it means. Leeward, yeah, because leeward on a boat is the downwind side of the boat. Excuse me. There's nothing he feared quite so much in a storm as a lee shore. I was in far too bad a way, though, for any thought of possible danger to enter my head, as I was suffering the torments of that sluggish brand of seasickness that will not bring one relief, the kind that upsets the stomach without clearing it. So I put pressure on him and compelled him willy-nilly to make for the shore. Once we were close in there was no waiting on my part for anything to be done in the manner commended by Virgil, quote, bows faced seawards, or anchor cast from bow, end quote. Remembering my training as a long-standing devotee of cold baths, I dived into the sea in just the way a cold water addict ought to, in my woolly clothes. You can imagine what I suffered as I crawled out over the rocks, as I searched for a route to safety or fought my way there. It made me realize how right sailors are in being afraid of a lee shore. What I endured and my inability to endure my then self is beyond belief. You can take it from me that the reason Ulysses got himself wrecked everywhere was not so much because Neptune was against him from the day he was born, but because he was given to seasickness like me. It'll take me 20 years to reach my destination, too, if I ever have to journey anywhere by sea. As soon as I'd settled my stomach, for stomachs, as you know, aren't clear of seasickness the moment they're clear of the sea, and rubbed myself over with embrocation to put some life back into my body, I began to reflect how we are attended by an appalling forgetfulness of our weaknesses, even the physical ones, which are continually bringing themselves to our notice, and much more so with those that are not only more serious, but correspondingly less apparent. A slight feverishness may deceive a person, but When it has developed to the point where a genuine fever is raging, it will extract an admission that something is wrong from even a tough and hardened individual. Suppose our feet ache, with a little needling pains in the joints. At this stage, we pass it off and say we've sprained an ankle, or strained something in some exercise or other. While the disorder is in its indeterminate, commencing phase, its name eludes us. But once it starts bending the feet in just the way an ankle rack does and makes them both misshapen, we have to confess that we've got the gout. With afflictions of the spirit, though, the opposite is the case. The worse a person is, the less he feels it. You needn't feel surprised, my dear Lucilius. A person sleeping lightly perceives impressions in his dreams and is sometimes even aware during sleep that he is asleep, whereas a heavy slumber blots out even dreams and plunges the mind too deep for consciousness or self. Why does no one admit his failings? Because he's still deep in them. It's the person who's awakened who recounts his dream, and acknowledging one's failings is a sign of health. So let us rouse ourselves so that we may be able to demonstrate our errors. But only philosophy will wake us. Only philosophy will shake us out of that heavy sleep. Devote yourself entirely to her. You're worthy of her. She's worthy of you. Fall into each other's arms. Say a firm, plain no to every other occupation. There's no excuse for your pursuing philosophy merely in moments when occasion allows. If you were sick, you would take a rest from attending to your personal affairs and drop your practice in the courts. And during a spell of improvement in your condition, you wouldn't look on any client as being so important that you'd undertake his case in court. No, you'd devote your entire attention to recovering from your illness in the quickest possible time. Well then, aren't you going to do the same in these circumstances? Away with every obstacle and leave yourself free to acquire a sound mind. No one ever attains this if he's busy with other things. Philosophy wields an authority of her own. She doesn't just accept time, she grants one it. She's not something one takes up in odd moments. She's an active, full-time mistress, ever present and demanding. When some state or other offered Alexander a part of its territory and half of all its property, he told them that, quote, he hadn't come to Asia with the intention of accepting whatever they cared to give him, but of letting them keep whatever he chose to leave them, end quote. Philosophy likewise tells all other occupations, quote, it's not my intention to accept whatever time is left over from you. You shall have instead what I reject, end quote. Give your whole mind to her. Sit at her side and pay her constant court, and an enormous gap will widen between yourself and other men. You'll end up far in advance of all mankind, and not far behind the gods themselves. Would you like to know what the actual difference between yourself and the gods will be? They will exist for longer. And yet to me, what an indisputable mark it is of a great artist to have captured everything in a tiny compass. A wise man has as much scope before him as a god with all eternity in front of him. There is one thing, too, in which the wise man actually surpasses any god. A god has a nature to thank for his immunity from fear, while the wise man can thank his own efforts for this. Look at that for an achievement, to have all the frailty of a human being and all the freedom from care of a god. Philosophy's power to blunt all the blows of circumstances beyond belief. Never a missile lodges in her. She has a strong, impenetrable defenses. Some blows she breaks the force of, parrying them with the slack of her gown as if they were trivial. Others she flings off and hurls back at the sender. What an interesting chapter. I think there were several important bits in there, but one I'm going to be thinking on more. Why does no one admit his failings? Because he's still deep in them. It's the person who's awakened who recounts his dream, and acknowledging one's failings is a sign of health. The other part was philosophy sort of demanding full attention. And that's something I've been struggling with lately. I've not been giving my morning think times in this reading the appropriate level of attention, and I have significantly lost some of the benefits that I get from it, like new and novel thoughts and encouraging ideas every day. Those used to come very quickly every day, but for the past month or so, I've been half-assing it, basically, because I've been distracted and thinking about other things. I haven't been giving philosophy my full attention during these times. So I think that might be something I'm going to work on, maybe for the rest of this month, actually. Okay, let's start the next letter. This is letter 54. Ill health, which had granted me quite a long spell of leave, has attacked me without warning again. Quote, what kind of ill health, you'll be asking? And, well, you may, for there isn't a single kind I haven't experienced. There's one particular ailment, though, for which I've always been singled out, so to speak. I see no reason why I should call it by its Greek name, i.e., so there's an asterisk with a footnote that says, i.e., its medical name, which is its Greek name to us, right? Or its Greek name is its medical name to us, asthma. I see no reason why I should call it by its Greek name, difficulty in breathing being a perfectly good way of describing it. Its onslaught is of very brief duration, like a squall. It is generally over within the hour. One could hardly, after all, expect anyone to keep on drawing his last breath for long, could one? I've been visited by all the troublesome or dangerous complaints there are, and none of them, in my opinion, is more unpleasant than this one, which is hardly surprising, is it? When you consider that with anything else you're merely ill, while with this you're constantly at your last gasp. This is why doctors have nicknamed it rehearsing death, since sooner or later the breath does just what it has been trying to do all those times. Do you imagine that as I write this, I must be feeling in high spirits at having escaped this time? No, it would be just as absurd for me to feel overjoyed at its being over, as if this means I was a healthy man again, as it would be for a person to think he has won his case on obtaining extension of time before trial. Even as I fought for breath, though, I never ceased to find comfort in cheerful and courageous reflections. What's this? I said. So death is having all these tries at me, is he? Let him then. Let him a try. I lost my ability to read. Let him then. I had a try at him a long while ago myself. When was this, you'll say? Before I was born. Death is just not being. What that is like, I know already. It will be the same after me as it was before me. If there is any torment in the later state, there must also have been torment in the period before we saw the light of day, yet we never felt conscious of any distress then. I ask you, wouldn't you say that anyone who took the view that a lamp was worse off when it was put out than before it was lit was an utter idiot? We too are lit and put out. We suffer somewhat in the intervening period, but at either end of it there is a deep tranquillity. For, unless I'm mistaken, we are wrong, my dear Lucilius, in holding that death follows after, when in fact it precedes as well as succeeds. Death is all that was before us. What does it matter, after all, whether you cease to be or never begin, when the result of either is that you do not exist? I kept on talking to myself in these and similar terms, silently, needless to say, words being out of the question. Then, little by little, the affliction in my breathing, which was coming to be little more than panting now, came at longer intervals and slackened away. It has lasted on all the same, and in spite of the passing of this attack, my breathing is not yet coming naturally. I feel a sort of catch and hesitation in it. Let it do as it pleases, though, so long as the sighs aren't heartfelt. You can feel assured on my score of this. I shall not be afraid when the last hour comes. I'm already prepared, not planning as much as a day ahead. The man, though, whom you should admire and imitate is the one who finds it a joy to live, and in spite of that is not reluctant to die. For where's the virtue in going out when you're really being thrown out? And yet, there is this virtue about my case. I am in the process of being thrown out, certainly, but the manner of it is as if I were going out. And the reason why it never happens to a wise man is that being thrown out signifies expulsion from a place one is reluctant to depart from, and there is nothing the wise man does reluctantly. He escapes necessity because he wills what necessity is going to force on him. What did he call asthma? Rehearsing death? Doctors nicknamed asthma rehearsing death. Man. I don't have asthma. And I think inhalers probably, I don't know. I'll have to ask somebody with asthma if that's an apt nickname. That's crazy. It's kind of scary. Yeah, so I think my thought today is kind of what I talked about. I'm going to think about for the rest of today and then work on probably for the rest of this month. Just reacquiring my focus during my think times. All the new changes in life and new responsibilities and the job and all this stuff are extremely high priority, right? And so it was important to kind of put them in the number one spot for at least a little while, and it definitely still is in turn, like over everything. But I'm also starting to lose some of my tranquility and focus that I gained from these morning habits. So I'm going to focus on kind of bouncing back to those and doing my morning think times more rigorously and focusing on the readings again. All right, guys, have a fantastic day.